Behind me is a church that's used as a polling station on election day. Most of the people who go through those doors will vote for a candidate from one of three parties. Independents and people from small parties will barely get a look in. Google independent candidates' advice and you will find a lot of articles wondering whether or not it was even worth the bother turning up. But that's where this video comes in. I'm a journalist, and through my career I've spoken to many independents and people from small parties who had good ideas but were working within a system that wasn't kind to them. But no more, this video is that advice. I've been speaking to independents and people from small parties, I've been researching them, and I've gathered their tips. I have no specific love of independents or people from small parties. A good candidate is a good candidate. However, I want to give good candidates the tools they need to make a difference. Let's get started. This is served to telephone exchange. These days it's obsolete and basically just serves to name a bus stop, but it will illustrate my number one point. Be networked. In order to get your £500 deposit back at a general election, you need to get 5% of the vote, which means convincing around 3,700 people that you're worth voting for. This, of course, varies wildly across the country, but it is a good number to keep in the back of your mind. Social media is your friend here. Jo Beavis stood in Braintree at the 2019 general election, and she has been an independent councillor for many, many years before that. She says about how much easier it is nowadays to contact people than in the days before Facebook.
One remembers that in that time, it was just about leafleting all the time, and it was so hard to get your own message out there. It's very different today with social media. It's instant, and you see a pothole, you can get to the issue directly. That's a real change, I think, from what it was when I started 20 years ago.
In 2019 at the general election, Claire Wright did the best out of any independent candidate. She got over 40% of the vote, and the BBC almost sent cameras to her house because it looked like she was going to win outright. And she told the Iron newspaper that part of the reason that she did so well is because she had stood 2 times previously. At this point, she was known around town. John Morris is the leader of the Peace Party, and he stood in Guildford every year since 1997. He says that gathering momentum is a crucial first step.
Make sure you've got a team of people around you, friends, people who know you and are keen to follow you into the election area. 2 or 3 will probably do, but a larger group is good, and that's what has happened to me. I've met people out on the street, on the doorstep. I'm in the Quakers, so all the time we can be talking about peace and making a better world, and that's the opportunity to build up the group of people around.
The Peace Party has only ever got its deposit back once.
A Muslim guy who stood in Middlesbrough, and he gathered all his faith people around, and they got more than the 5%, a lot more than the 5%. So it was a wonderful day when I could walk into the local town hall and pick up the £500.
Be findable. When I first started this, I had a big list of people who had stood as independents over the years, and very few of them I could track down because so few of them have a web presence. Even the Wayback Machine didn't really seem to help, since some of these websites didn't seem to have ever been properly built, just logged as domain names. One guy I had to track down via the Contact Us page of the pub he manages, and I found out he manages this pub via an unconnected local news story. That's how deep I went. Somebody who genuinely wants to find you. Potential supporters and voters will not go that deep. So here's some tips. First of all, Twitter and Facebook. Make sure you have them. They are free. On Twitter, make sure you have your direct messages open. If you have a website, have a contact us form. Fill all of these with flattering photos and videos of yourself. Make it clear they can be used as well. And have somewhere on there where your aims are outlined really simply and really clearly. You can do not very much and still get noticed. Look at Jim Woolard in Thurrock. He posted a short daily update from time to time, and people engaged with these. He ended up with over 1,000 votes, and he beat the Green Party candidate. Being findable has other benefits as well, and by other, I mean money. This is Arthur Pendragon, commonly known as King Arthur Uther Pendragon, senior druid at Stonehenge. He has been standing as an independent in parliamentary and local elections since the 1980s in various seats. And he has this to say about fundraising.
It's the golden rule in as much as he who has the most gold rules. So the political parties always disadvantage the independent. You have a right to ask. It doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can do fundraising any way you like. You can put out on social media, for instance, that you require money to stand as an independent candidate. And that is perfectly legal in British law.
Tower blocks, love them or hate them, they're a local issue. They're only really important to the people directly affected by them. And that's my point now. Keep it local. You only have to look at the names of two parties who actually got into power in order to work this one out. The Blaenau Gwent People's Voice Party, which is a town in South Wales, and the Independent Kidderminster Hospital and Health Concern Party. In 2019, the Ashfield Independents did very well, beating Labour by 3% of the vote. They had been elected to the local council as a landslide, and they had a very good, proven track record of being good locally. This is what Arthur Pendragon has to say.
There's no point concentrating on national matters. I'll tell you why. Because you're not a party. You don't have a national policy. Let's say it's a garrison town. Then obviously you're going to have to concentrate on things that affect the armed forces. If you're trying to represent a seaside town, you're going to have to concentrate on what matters to the people there. And it's going to be different across the nation. It's going to be different wherever you stand. And that's the beauty of being an independent. You can tailor your strengths to local issues, and that's what you've got to do.
A military town focusing on the armed forces, or a seaside town focusing on shipping or fishing, is only one level of local targeting. You're looking at the whole area. Jo Beavis targeted her leafleting campaign on a really local level.
We did it sort of by area, so if there was a specific issue in an area, we would have a leaflet printed up for that, and we would sort of promote that area.
Even Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, makes a point to show his face around the constituency.
I want to say how grateful I am to all the amazing staff at Hillingdon Hospital for all the work that you do.
If even the most national MP can't ignore the local, there is no way you can.
As it stands, you could have a Welshman representing an English constituency standing for the Scottish National Party. And the reality is, you know, an independent can only represent the people who elect him.
Ah, the law. It's that perfect blend of horrifying and dull, which is why I'm here in this lovely park to talk about it. It's not all glamour standing for an election.
What I didn't expect, and what I've now come to expect, is the amount of forms there are to be filled in. Not only in the run-up to the election, more so the parliamentaries than local or regional. Quite daunting if you've never been through it, but most of it you can work out, because most of it they will take you through. I mean, UK Gov sites are pretty good from that point of view.
However, there are people out there to help you, and seeking them out is the first thing that you should do once you've decided to run. Remember, you have to get all of this right first time.
Don't be scared to ask. Go down and ask them at the local town hall or the local council and say, specifically, what do I need to run as a candidate in this election? And bear it in mind, you can have an election officer, you can also have counting officers. There's all sorts of different things, but you can do it, as I have in the past, all yourself. You name yourself your own election officer, your own counting officer, etc. It is possible to do it all yourself, but you've got to know what's needed and what you need to do for whatever the election is.
Part of the reason that Joe Beavis tries to self-fund as much as possible is the accountancy involved.
I've always, tried to self-fund as much as I can myself without going out any further. Election expenses can be jolly complicated and complex. And I think as much as you can, particularly when you're an individual independent, is to keep it as simple as you can.
Be real. This is a quality I assume is also treasured by our gangster friends here. People can tell if you're acting, especially if you're untrained. And one of the things I've learned in broadcasting is that being genuine really goes a long way into helping people empathise with you.
If you're not genuine, then you'll be spotted as a liar and a thief. So by being genuine, you earn trust and respectability. Because if you do try lying, you start to lie once, you will lie again, then you're just covering up the truth. So if you tell the truth, if you are honest rather, you'll find that life is a lot easier. In terms of being genuine on air, on the radio, then the tone of your voice will change if you're not genuine.
In his book, The Accidental MP, Martin Bell, the man in the white suit, speaks about his time as the first elected independent for 47 years. And what stood out to me was this one bit right at the beginning, when he was going up against the Tory MP for the area, Neil Hamilton. And Neil and his wife sprung a political elephant trap that Bell fell right into. It was just before his first big press conference. Everyone was there, and Neil and his wife ask a really difficult question, and Bell kind of flubs it. And he fears that's all over for him before it's even really got started. Instead, according to Bell, people felt for the amateur having sand kicked in his face, and it was actually a victory for him. And he acted genuinely. If you're on your own, all you have is yourself. That's something you have to play to.
It's always about, who you are as the candidate, your relation to the patch that you're going to be standing in, and what it actually is you're standing for. So, I'm Joanne, I've lived locally, and I really care about adult social care, and make it very clear and succinct.
This is the Claremont Gardens Bug Hotel. Most people think of bugs as disgusting monsters, and these things have to fight to stay alive in a world that hates them and forgives very little. People accept them as part of the ecosystem that's there, but deep down wish they were dead. As you can tell, this is totally unrelated information. I don't know why I brought it up. This section is called Work Hard and Keep Going.
All I can do is to keep on, and all that others do is just to keep standing in elections and put over the message and hope that people join you.
Claire Wright, who I mentioned earlier as being the most successful independent at the 2019 general election, told Devon Live after the election that when you're in an election like that, it's non-stop canvassing. This time last week, I was going around West Hill knocking door to door, and she'd been doing that for 6 weeks. When you're going around knocking on doors for 6 weeks, it better be because you've got a really, really good reason to do it. Part of working hard is working smart. And Joe Beavis says this about the other independents that she works with.
When you're standing for an election, you have to focus on that election. It's jolly hard work. It's doorstep by doorstep. It's house by house. You have to have a good plan, and you do have to stick to it. It's so easy to go off onto an issue. One of my candidates was saying to me the other day that something had cropped up in his patch, and all of a sudden he was out with the police, and they were going to look at the issue. And I was saying to him, and how's the doorstep campaign going? So I think, my best advice to people is, for that period of election, just keep it simple, have a very good election plan, and discipline yourself to stick to it.
And Arthur Pendragon says, don't bite off more than you can chew when it comes to leafleting. Remember that you've got to work out what you're doing before spending a whole load of time and money.
For the parliamentaries, there's what's called a free leaflet drop. Don't fall into the trap of thinking it's free. It's not. All that's free is the postage. You still got to get them printed. You've still got to get them enveloped, boxed up, labelled up, everything. And it's still going to cost you a fortune. So a lot of time when I can't afford the free postal drop, I get printed as many as I can and I push them through the letterboxes myself. And so if you're prepared to run, you've got to be prepared for the legwork as well.
The press is a difficult thing to manage if you've never had to manage it before. What sparked this all off was one person I interviewed, and this person was standing as an independent when they walked into the studio, and they'd been up all night. They kept needing a cigarette, and it was obvious that they hadn't properly prepared good logical points, because they kept talking about constituencies that they weren't standing in. I spoke to somebody who went to the hustings that they were at, and it was clear that they were basically the same there as well. It wasn't just a one-off. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you some media training now. When you're on stage, when you're speaking to somebody, or maybe you're just trying to do a piece to camera by yourself, it's nerve-wracking. Don't worry, just don't worry, just don't worry. Okay, now I'm not worrying, but I am exhausted. You've got to think. There's blinding lights. There's expectation, and there are people to the side of you and in front of you with far more experience and far more judgment in their minds than you do. In that awful moment that you'll forget everything that you prepared. You'll think, whoa, this will happen to you, I promise you, unless you're prepared so thoroughly, it's almost a reflex. The key to all of this training that I'm talking about is you've got to train in poor conditions. You've got to make things deliberately difficult for yourself. I once tried stand-up comedy, and I wish that I had trained with a torch in my eyes, because when I got up on that stage and there was light blaring at me and people booing, I would have liked that, because you've got to learn how to keep your eyes open and not make it look like it's getting to you, which it did. So what can you do to help yourself? Well, first of all, give yourself a minute to answer a question. Then give yourself 50 seconds to answer the same question with the exact same content. Then keep whittling this down until you can get it into 15 seconds. Get your friends to ask you the same question over and over and over and over until it just comes out naturally. And try and give yourself a good amount of pacing as well. Try and give the same answer, but try going at a slower speed and try going at a faster speed. See what feels natural for you. All of these performance techniques will help you feel better in the long run. If you need to re-record something, then do it. I had to re-record parts of this because I wasn't satisfied with it. Never use the first take if you don't have to. The point of what I'm saying is that you need to train in poor conditions. Well, I hope that helped. Some general tips to close this out would be to speak to as many people as you can. Don't let this video be the end of your education. Check out Jay Townsend on YouTube. He's the sort of expert who you can see the flashbacks behind his eyes as he talks. Learn a bit about libel law, because your opponent does, and you don't want that offhand comment to get you into trouble. And don't be the independent who says, I'm not constrained by party politics and that's why I'm good, because they all say that. It doesn't mean that you're any good. Well, don't be a stranger. Let me know how it goes. I'll leave you with this from King Arthur Uther Pendragon.
The hundreds of people who vote for me, and it is in the hundreds, you know, the high hundreds, they wanted me as their parliamentary candidate. So sometime later, if I write something in the local paper, the editor of the local paper or the people reading that letter will think, hang on a minute, he might not be the MP, but there's at least 1,000 people or 10,000 people who voted for him, who do support him. So he is a legitimate voice and it's worth listening. And then you can play that numbers game when you go along to planning applications, or when you go along to local council meetings or parliamentary debates, or whatever it is you're invited along as, or you get yourself along to. You can say, you know, I have a mandate here. I am representing X amount of people. Let's say you stand for the local council, you get 400 votes, and whoever gets in's got 11,000. You still represent 400 of the people who live in that ward or that area. And when you go along to a town council meeting, they'll remember you, the councillors, and you can remind them. You can say, hang on a minute. I'm not just speaking on my own behalf here. I'm speaking for all those that supported me in the previous election. So it makes you a legitimate voice for opposition. So it's worth doing for that reason alone.